All right, welcome back. Right now I'm just going to do a quick video on the pose tool. This will be a shorter video. It's not that there isn't a lot of stuff that can be done with the pose tool. It's just a very simple and efficient way to model and change your shapes. It's a little bit like the transform tool in some ways, but it adds a whole host of new possibility, or it's more similar to the move tool than the transform tool. I have the pose tool set to Shift P, but it's down here in the adjust menu. But I'm just going to use Shift P to activate it. And again, there are a lot of different modes to this, but they're all over here in your tool options palette. If your tool options palette is ever hidden or you accidentally close it, just go to Windows, Pop-ups, and it is in the, it's right here, tool palette. And that goes for every other palette. You know, if you ever find yourself with one of these missing, you just come up over here to Windows, Pop-ups. The other thing you can do if everything's missing is just restore or restore workspace. It sets everything back to the factory default. But back to the pose tool. Okay, here we are in the tool options right over here. Right now, select object is active. So, like, let's say you have multiple voxel layers. You know, it's easy enough to use the transform tool to move things around. But what if you've made multiple objects in one layer? You go to the pose tool and you have select object activated. You can pick objects within the same layer independently of each other. I have that function set to Shift O. To deselect an object, you go to Clear Selection, or I have that hotkey set to Shift C. I can select one, I can select both of them. You know, if you move one, this is the only thing you have to be careful of. If you move two objects within the same box tree layer into each other using the pose tool and hit Shift C, they will become one. That function should be exploited. You know, if you're having a hard time sculpting something in one piece, break it down. Try sculpting it in separate pieces and then moving everything together. I think once I do a few of these videos where I explain more of the tools, I'm going to do a time-lapse video with no narration, but just me working. I think that might be useful to show you some of the strategies I use to break down a real project that I'm doing, rather than just these abstract exercises. Then there's the back to the shift to the pose tool and the tool options. If you come up to this little menu right here, here are all your options. You have line, ring, sphere, paint select, select object. Right now I'm going to use the line selection option. And the way this works, you hover over the object you want to manipulate. This point here, this little white point, that's where my selection will start. And if I bring this out, and you see that red line to the red dot, that's going to be the transition area of your selection. So What that means is that the influence of the selection when I transform this object is going to be smaller here than it is here. And in practical terms, it's the difference between having a nice soft transition, and now I'm going to show you what happens when I have a very short distance to go from the same point. It creates a much sharper turn. And that doesn't just work for translating. You can warp an object. And that was a much smoother way to manipulate that shape than try to sculpt on and draw on all of these extra spots. It's a good way to change your, if you're designing something and you don't like the proportional relationship from this area to this area, all you have to do is use the pose tool rather than start from scratch. You do have to watch out. As you make a larger object in 3D code, you end up with more triangles. So you saw I went from 1 million to 8 million. So again, all of this stuff needs to be done with a little bit of care, and ideally it's done on an incremental basis. So you're never trying to make the program do too many calculations at one time. That's kind of that's basically the guiding principle anytime you're using a computer, or anything really, your brain. Like, you try not to make it do too many things at once. You break down complicated tasks into simpler chunks. So those are two modes of the pose tool. There are other ones. They're not as useful. Like, I never use, I shouldn't say never. It's just rare for me to use the ring selection. It's rare for me to use the sphere or the paint select. You would think paint select would be one of the more useful ones, but it turns out to be a little goofy because sometimes you end up painting things you don't mean to, and you get yourself into trouble. Also, the pressure input isn't super precise, but if you're doing let's say you're doing a mountain range, you can do some interesting stuff. Like right here, we made a cool little cliff. We can have a little person eating a sandwich with their little picnic basket. All of a sudden you have a nice little composition that you can paint over in Photoshop. You don't always have to go and spend crazy amounts of time in these 3D programs. This, again, like these programs exist to save work, not make more work for you. And as you get better at using them, they will speed up your workflow dramatically. Let's see, back to the pose tool, paint select, and we went over select object. So that's the pose tool. Some of the secondary modes, the airbrush mode, that makes the paint select a little bit more useful. It offers a little bit more control. It also responds to alphas. Say change my alpha. Got predator vision right now. See, that made it even better. Set of rocks. Calculate. It's thinking. I know in class I've shown you guys how to reset your axis. So when you have a selection, this gizmo, it tries to match it projects 90 degrees out from the center of your selection, which can be useful, but when you want to move it along the general axis of your selection, but let's say you wanted to move it straight up, doing it this way would be kind of difficult. You come down here and use that and guess, or you can go to reset axis, and it resets that gizmo to the world geometry coordinates. So in plain English, it resets the gizmo to up, down, left, and right. The cardinal directions in up, down, left, right. Yeah, that's it. The cardinal directions in Euclidean space. The other ones, you can save your selections, you can invert your selections, or you can actually load them. I don't use that very often. I can see how it would be useful in certain cases. If you had a shape that needed to be made over and over again, that would be an easy way to do it. But there are so many other ways of doing it that are even more efficient that I wouldn't even bother using these functions. So that goes over the basic functions of the pose tool. And again, you'll see all of these tools being demoed a little bit in a more sophisticated manner when I decide to do the time lapse. But all right, bye bye.